listening to the Motherhood Experience, a podcast where you are part of the conversation with moms, for moms, and by moms. Let's jump into this episode with me, your host, Val Kleppen. Well, hello, friend, and welcome to the Motherhood Experience. So glad to have you joining me today. My guest today is Kristen Strong, author of her latest book, Desperate Woman Seeks Friends. I'm sure from the title alone, that is something that all of you can resonate with and relate to. We had such an incredible conversation where she talked about her first pregnancy being twins and her launch into motherhood by mothering 2 children at one time. We talked about what life was like as a young mom for her, and now her 3 children are in their 20s. We talked about writing and expressing yourself creatively, but also, and primarily, we talked a lot in this episode about community and friendships and relationships, how to form them, why they're important. And I really could have talked with her about this for so much longer. I feel like we really could have gone so deep on so many points, and there were so many questions running through my mind. So Kristen, when you listen to this, I do hope you will come back. I will preface by saying something that has never happened before. My internet, and I was hardwired for this interview, not even on Wi-Fi, cut out. It completely cut out, and she had to run to another interview. So I couldn't ask all of the questions that I wanted to ask, and I couldn't peel all of those layers back. But what we were able to cover is so insightful. It was such a rich conversation. I'm so grateful that she was a guest. And so after you leave us a 5-star review, wherever you listen to podcasts, I encourage you, and I'm excited for you to listen to this entire conversation with Kristen Strong. Please remember and make note that all of the links for her website, for her book, they are in the show notes of this episode, so you can find her and connect with her. And I would encourage you to do so, because I think that her message in this book in particular is so important and so needed for today. So I encourage you to check her out. And now here is my conversation with Kristen Strong. Kristen, welcome to the Motherhood Experience.
Thank you so much for having me, Val. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yes, and we start every episode with ages of kids and stage of motherhood you're in. So why don't you share that with the listening audience?
I love that. I love talking about my kids. So I am the mama of twin sons who are 25 and a daughter that is 21, almost 22 next week. And so I'm in the empty nester years. Like 2 of them live very far away. Well, my daughter's coming back she studied abroad in Spain this year, or this semester. So she's coming back at the end of the month though. So I'm real happy about that. But yeah, definitely an empty nester.
Okay. So I have so many questions already that I'm thinking of, but I'll start with when you were growing up, a little girl. I don't know, do you have siblings? Were you an only child?
I did have siblings. I'm the oldest. I'm the oldest daughter, all the memes, the oldest daughter, oldest granddaughter,
Yes.
the oldest daughter's the best son you'll ever have, things like that. That's
Yes.
I feel like I can resonate with some of that, but anyway, I am the oldest of 3 daughters. So we were all girls, and kind of interestingly enough, I grew up in Osage County, Oklahoma. So I live in Colorado Springs now, but I'm an Oklahoma girl, born and bred. And I grew up on O'Neill Lane, and my last name was O'Neill. Like, my maiden name was O'Neill. Everybody's last name on O'Neill Lane was O'Neill. So I grew up with family, deep roots, expansive limbs, so so lots of cousins and whatnot. And we were real girl heavy. My family was. There were some boys, but yeah, my family of origin, certainly 3 daughters.
Oh, I love that. Okay. So also an oldest daughter here. Did your relationship with your siblings shape or influence what you thought motherhood would be like for you one day?
I would say so because one of my sisters is not even 2 years younger than me, but my baby sister, she is almost 10 years younger than me. And so I was kind of like a little, mama number two to her in some
Hmm.
ways, babysat her even in college when I would come home. She was in elementary school. I would take her out to lunch, really, really was like a hands on big sister. So yeah. And, I babysat too, but I definitely thought, I was one of those girls that always wanted to be a mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And so when you did become a mom, or maybe even before, did you have any ideas of big family, small family, one boy, one girl? Like as an oldest, I think you had some plan or some idea of what you thought you would want. So what was that?
well, I'll tell you, I wanted 5 kids, and then I had twins and tweaked that tweaked that number. so, so yes, there's the idealistic, what you think, and then you get in the trenches, and you're like, well,
Right.
maybe
Right.
not, but honestly, I mean, too, and my husband, had a part in that. Like, he wasn't sure he wanted any kids. Like when we were dating, and I said, well, I definitely want kids, so this may be a deal breaker. And then
Yeah.
he came around. He's like, no, I do want children. And so, three then is kind of a middle of the road.
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. And so launching right into it with two kids at once, two boys at once,
Mhm.
when did you find out you were having twins?
Pretty early, first ultrasound. We were stationed, we were military. My husband is a veteran of the Air Force, and so we were stationed at that time at Wright Patterson, which is in the Dayton, Ohio area. And Wright Patterson has a huge medical clinic, and it's a training clinic. So they train a lot of residents there, and those that are going through are becoming doctors in that military, under that military umbrella, Air Force umbrella.
Hmm.
And so plus I was twin, so I was automatically labeled quote unquote high risk.
Hmm.
Now I carried them without a problem. My daughter was another situation, but they just, multiples, they give you extra care. But because of that, and I was at a training hospital, they handed out, even this was in 98 actually, when I had the first ultrasound. They handed out ultrasounds like candy. It was really like quite generous. Now I think maybe that's more normal, but it wasn't back then. You might have had one like at the 20-week mark,
Hmm.
but generally you didn't have them every month. So I had them every month, starting at, I think, my first second appointment, maybe 8 weeks, and then she's doing the ultrasound and she's like, oh, what do we have here? And so it was a second, a second little baby in there. So
So do twins run in your family at all, or your husband's family?
yes. So in my family, for sure, I have twin great uncles, and my grandmother told me the story I heard, and maybe I'm remembering this incorrectly, but the story I heard was my mom was a twin. Actually, my grandmother was carrying twins, but she had a fall down some stairs and prematurely gave birth to the twin. But my mom, for whatever reason, stayed put, and that's highly irregular. So
Wow.
so I get so sometimes I think, do I remember that correctly? But that's what my grandmother had told me at one point. So yes, the answer is, and I have twin cousins as well. So they do run in the family. Now I will, in the interest of transparency, I was having a hard time getting pregnant. So we were on, I was taking some fertility meds. So I was really playing with fire,
Yeah.
but anyway, it resulted in two little babies. So
Yeah. Fraternal or identical twins?
fraternal,
Okay.
yeah, just brothers born at the same time. One is a blonde, one is a brunette, and yeah, and one's got just a cup. One's 6'4", the other 6'2". Couple
Okay.
differences. Yeah.
So two brothers with the same or born at the same time. I love how you explained that. And very different personalities also.
Very different. Yes. One's, well, I can't really say what he does exactly, but he does a job that involves, the fighter sort of side of things, while the other one is a lover. You know what I'm saying? So, so, so very different personalities, both just the delight, such a delight to their dad and me, but yes, very, very different.
Yeah. I would say going from wanting 5 children to having twins your first pregnancy, the Lord was just like, "Let's just get you a head start on that."
Yeah, yeah. You want 5? Bet. Here we go. So
So then how was that pregnancy different from your pregnancy with your daughter?
yeah. Well, that one, I was teaching full time while I was pregnant. I was a music teacher at that time for elementary school, public K through 5 school. So, I was on my feet quite a bit. But generally it just went pretty smoothly. Now, they were born in August. They were due the end of August, but they were born in the beginning of August. And of course, I was done teaching sometime in June. But so I had that last haul, a good deal of rest coming in at that point. But really, appointments were pretty smooth by and large. There were no red flags. But then with my daughter, red flags from the beginning, I did with both pregnancies bleed early on, but thankfully it wasn't a miscarriage in those two cases. Thank the good Lord. But with my daughter, there was from the beginning, she did not attach fully to the placenta. The placenta did not attach fully to my uterus. I was on quote unquote partial bed rest the whole time, which it was real fun because my husband traveled all the time and I had 3-year-old twins, that was hard to do. Thankfully, I had a great community of military spouses. I lived on base. They really stepped in and helped. But so that to and then, so just, constant monitoring. Like she was labeled high risk too, but for like I was told at the beginning, you have a 50-50 shot of carrying this baby to term, because there was just something at every turn. And then when she was born, like the cord was wrapped twice around her neck, and so that was a little precarious when the OB yells at you, do not push at all, you freeze, as hard as that is to do at that point. So yeah, she was born tiny. She was smaller than her brothers, who were twins. The boys were 5'12", 5'14". She was 5'4". It got down to 4'12". But but you would never know it today. She's just a spitfire, and goes 90, nothing to 90, as they say. So
yeah. And for her growing up with 2 older brothers who were the same age and like this, the same physical stature and skill sets, and she behind them, what was it a rough and tumble? Did they treat her like a little doll?
Well, as a newborn, yes, they were very sweet and attentive. Like we never had that, thing where they were real jealous of her and just kind of being ornery with her. That wasn't so much a thing. They did treat her like a little doll when she was little tiny. They just doted on her. Now, as she got older, she always had a black eye or a goosebump on her forehead because she was always running to catch up with them and falling. I thought, oh, I'm going to take it in here because somebody's going to think she's getting these by from a parent. She wasn't. It was just she was always chasing them and trying to keep up with them. Now there were rough patches more during the elementary, maybe like preschool, elementary years, where she so wanted to be in the middle of what they were doing, and they didn't always want little sister there. So they could be then real ornery to her. And like there was times where I was like, oh my gosh. I remember one time crawling up on my dining room table because they had just been ugly to her. And I saw this from, I don't know who did it originally. This wasn't my original idea, but I took an egg standing on my dining room table and I dropped it. And I told them, this is her heart. You're doing this every time you are ugly to her, just trying to give a picture lesson there. But the hope of this is as adults, those 3 are thick as thieves. Like they talk all the time. They are like best friends. And so if you would have told me that would be the case 10, 15 years ago, I would have said, no way. But that's the hope is, the Lord softens their hearts and can, mold those ornery tendencies out of them, and the good ones, bring them to life more. So
yeah. Such a sweet story and such a sweet object lesson to also as a mom in the thick of it, to be able to have the presence of mind to be like, you know what, grab an egg and we're going to teach them something instead of, cowering in the corner crying because There's
Right.
another fight broke out.
Right. I know. I know. And now that I think of it, I probably stood on the chair by the dining room table. I don't think I stood on the dining room table, but I lifted the egg up over the table and let it
Yeah.
splat hither and yon. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, it was like, oh my gosh, enough is enough.
Right.
So,
And so I heard you mention this or allude to this in both, that your husband was military and so he was traveling a lot. You were single parenting a lot then, I'm assuming?
yeah, I sure was. I mean, a lot of the times I had good friends too. We would, kind of be each other's support system during that time. But yeah, a lot of their younger years, not so much middle school and up, but their younger years, yeah, for sure. It was it was a lot of solo parenting.
Yeah. And h- how would you kind of recount that today? Because when you're parents of young children, especially, you're learning how to parent at the same time that they're learning how to do anything at all. And there's a real pull, I think, of
Mm.
wills or determination of wanting to learn things and wanting to teach things, and maybe those aren't the same thing. So with your husband, you know, providing for your family but not at home some of the time, how did that work for you? What did that look like?
You know what? That's such a good question, and I know exactly how it happened. Is because I had more times than not, at least a couple of good friends who were just good mamas. I would watch them and copy them. I mean, I learned a lot from my friends who were in the same life stage, or I would ask a mentor mom who was a little older than me, what did you do when this happened? And she would tell me, and I just copied it, like
Yeah.
that honestly is what I, think of. I mean, probably a little bit drawing on childhood stuff as well, but by and large, like, yeah, I feel like I just had friends who knew what they were doing. And I did feel pretty, like I often say, I felt better, more competent at the littler years than I do as doing life with adult kids because it is so, you just have no control, at all. It's, you're sort of just a house, like my friend calls it houseplant parenting. You're sitting in the corner and speaking when spoken to, kind of,
Yeah.
you just don't get to weigh in like you did, and
Yeah.
so anyway, I felt like because of my little sister and babysitting, I probably had a little bit of skill set, but I definitely watched friends and just learned from them.
Yeah. What about when your husband came home kind of and was home more often? Did you adopt similar parenting styles? Did it take a while for him to kind of figure out the flow of things? What was that dynamic?
Yeah, there were times where, especially in the earlier years, later on, this wasn't so much a case because he also then, kind of got his own rhythms going. But I would say it was a little bit like he would come home and not really be with us. His mind was still on the work stuff, and so
Sure.
that was a bit of a transition because I was like, I need you in the game here, darling. And then he'd be like, oh my gosh, of course. It wasn't like
Right.
he was refusing. It was just like it didn't, his it was he had a hard time leaving work at work,
Sure.
and coming home. And that's why we've often lived actually a little ways from where he works because he likes a 30-minute drive home so he can kind of then transition.
Yeah.
But there were assignments where that wasn't the case, and so yeah, so that was, I would say, a little bit different. But I would say by and large we were pretty good at, we pretty much, like, what his strengths are aren't mine, and what my strengths are aren't his. So I think that's sometimes the Lord's way of bringing people together, and if he
Right.
makes them parents,
Right. Yeah.
um, they're able to compensate for the other one. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, what about your extended family? You grew up surrounded by them. How involved were they in the lives of your kids?
I would say my in-laws, well, they were all as involved as they could be, the distance was a factor. My in-laws stayed very involved in spite of the distance. In fact, we just lost my mother-in-law in February, and that's been, we've all been like, I had a great relationship with her. I know not everybody is blessed with that, but I just treasured that woman. And so that's been a real loss for us. And I would say my parents did the best they could, for sure. My dad, though, suffered from MS. So that was a huge,
Wow.
my mom was his caregiver and everything. So, it's not, they had only a limited amount of bandwidth, I think, for, kind of what was going on wherever we lived. And I haven't lived in Oklahoma since 1995. So I think they did the best they could,
Mhm.
certainly, at that time.
And so did you end up in Colorado because of a military station?
Yes, we moved here from Hawaii, and my husband got an assignment teaching at the Air Force Academy, and so that's actually where he still is. He's on the civilian side of the fence now.
Oh,
He's
wow.
retired from active duty Air Force, but yeah, he's still there working and does research. He works part with kiddos on their capstone projects that a lot of them have to do, but then also a lot of research in the physics department. So
Oh,
works with
wow.
a lot of work with telescopes, satellites and telescopes. So
Yeah. And did any of your children pursue a military career?
yes, I do have one that did, and that's the one where I can't really talk about anything with it, but yes, the answer is yes.
Understood. Understood. Oh, well, that's fascinating. And what a legacy, too.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we're real proud of that. We've loved being with the military. They have an important mission. I loved being a military wife. I think we serve in our own ways behind the scenes, and it can be a hard life, and certainly, we didn't have. My husband only had one deployment. Some military families have, 3, 4, 5
Yeah.
on up north of that, and so that's a much harder deal. And but it was really a good life to us, and God, the community we made is just, I mean, I treasure them still today. So
Yeah. Oh, that's so precious. And so I heard you say that you were a music teacher
mm.
in an elementary school. So I'm going to make an assumption here and say that you are a creative.
Yes.
And so was music always your interest, or did you kind of spread out into other things as well?
I would say honestly, holistically over my life, I wrote more than I played, probably. As a little girl, I wanted to write a book. And I would always make up these wild romantic tales, which I had no experience at, but, except watching, like movies and television shows. But so I loved writing. I was on like my middle school and high school newspaper staff, but it's interesting. I did start playing music in middle school, and I played oboe. It is like a very classical kind of nerdy instrument, but it's real beautiful. Like any sort of musical scores for movies, oboe has like tons of solos
Yeah.
and everything. So I played that starting in middle school through, and then, kind of had a knack for it. And,
Mhm.
then I was in band, and in band I was in color guard because oboes don't do marching band, but I was in color guard and just made a good group of friends. And honest to goodness, my best friends were music majors. So I thought, well, why not major in music? And I went to the school they, went to Oklahoma State. And so that, I feel like my friends probably influenced what I ended up doing. And I certainly enjoyed it. But there's always been a little part of me that's regretted not going to journalism school or something like that. Cause that's really, I mean, what a lifelong love of mine,
Mhm.
So, but, it all works out as it's supposed to, I guess.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's fascinating. And I think when you said oboe, I immediately thought of that old Disney cartoon Peter and the Wolf.
Yes. Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
The
okay.
duck.
Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember what it was, but I'm like, I know there's an oboe in there.
You're exactly right. Yep.
Okay.
I love that.
Yeah, so dating both of us a little bit. But that was one of my favorite cartoons as a kid, actually.
Yeah.
And just, sharing story to story here, a little nerdy insight into Val. When I was in 8th grade going into high school, we had to write a fictional story. And those stories determined whether or not we would make it into AP English.
Oh my gosh.
And I did not make the cut. And I was devastated because writing was my life. And I was like, surely I am going to get into AP English
Oh
as a
my
freshman.
gosh.
And I didn't. And I think it was like I had never really written fiction, and we had to write a fiction story. And I was like, this is just not, I'm a storyteller, not a story maker upper.
Right. No, that makes sense. It's a whole different, like, that's what I always say. I know my voice. I don't know how to do fiction where you got to do a lot of voices.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have been picked either. I wouldn't have been picked
Yeah.
either.
I mean, it was redeemed senior year. I made it into AP English. And so
Well,
all
very
is
good.
well. All is well.
Well, very
But
good. Oh, well, let me tell you, I was in AP English too. My
yeah,
senior year, we didn't like that was the only year we could take it. We couldn't, but I don't think I had to write an essay to get in. But I will tell you, like I felt like I was, and I loved literature. I loved writing, but I had a teacher tell me that regarding that class, I was like at the bottom of the smart kids. I will always remember that. I was like, thank you for that note of encouragement. I'm in the
oh my
smart class,
goodness.
but by fingernails is essentially what you're saying, you know.
Wow. Well, if they could see you now.
Well, there you go. Maybe I wasn't at the bottom.
So let's lean into this now, because you have recently written a new book.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to talk about that. Is this your first book? Have you written before? Tell me that history.
Yeah, this is traditionally published. It's my sixth book. And so I've done, this is my third trade book. And then I've done 2 devotionals and 1 gift book. So.
Oh, wow. So experienced.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so at this point, right?
Yeah, yeah. And do you have, like, would you say more of a conversational writing style or a teaching writing style?
Well, my friend, my editor actually would say that she thinks it's definitely a story style, but also like a big sister kind of a style where
Yeah.
I'm wanting to help you out, but not like and not like a bossy, annoying big sister, but like a helpful big sister coming as the big sister,
Right.
but a helpful big sister way. Where and listen, I think you can tell maybe I'm from Oklahoma or somewhere adjacent to that because I love a good, colloquialism and whatnot. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I would say definitely heavy leaning into the storytelling. I just think stories are so great at teaching us about our own, helping us see our own in a more hopeful light. So yeah.
Yeah. And so this latest book, Desperate Woman Seeks Friends.
Yes.
I'm so curious about this because throughout our conversation, you have shared with me about the people the Lord put in your life at the right times and how helpful they were. So how do those stories translate to this book called Desperate Woman Seeks Friends?
Yes. Well, really from the story I shared at the beginning, O'Neill Lane. Okay. So I'm on there. I'm really never, through high school, up through college, other than a couple of isolated times, I really never had to work to make friends. They were just kind of organically always there. And I mean, I'm sure I, had to maybe work a little bit, but not hard, it just happened more easily. Well, at Oklahoma State, I met David. We fell in love and we decided to get married. So that means I marry after my junior year because he's older than me and he was graduating. And then we were, because he was going through the ROTC program there to become an officer in the Air Force. And so we then moved to his first assignment. So I transferred schools as a senior, which, is not the best in some ways. It was the right move for me and I'm glad I did it, but it was also hard because I went to a school, I transferred to a school that had a small music school and everybody kind of already had their people, they weren't, I kind of assumed I'd show up, it was obvious I was new and they would welcome me into their circles, and that is not how it worked at all. And I realized I realized I had to do something to make friends, and I did not know how to do that. Making friends is an art and a skill. I was not naturally born with it. I had to figure that out, and so that's what I kind of wrote the book to help others figure out that maybe feel like they need a little help and encouragement too to keep on doing it because then even after I did figure out how to be a good friend, how to stop sabotaging my friendships. I would bring things early on like bring things to a friendship like high expectations, which, just feels like Ann Voskamp says, expectations kill relationships. And it does.
Hmm.
It like strangles them to death. So I had to learn how to stop doing that and stop doing things that I had blind spots about that were off putting the other person. And so, but also I then once I learned how to be a good friend and kind of how to put myself out there and go first and introduce myself to various folks and invite them into my home and whatnot, that didn't mean automatically you made friends. So that would be frustrating too, because I could do all the right things, quote unquote, and not make friends still. So
Yeah.
this kind of encompasses all that and more, really.
Yeah. And that is so key. So much of what you just said and shared, because hosting this podcast for the last almost 2 years now, the recurring theme that many moms share when I'm talking about their motherhood story is they often feel alone, or that they have to they're on their own in this motherhood journey. They have friends, but they can't coordinate these schedules because of kids' activities or husband work schedule or whatever the case. And so they just feel a little bit isolated. And even if they do have close friends or friends at all, it's still a silo situation a lot of the times in coordinating, whether it's gathering or just talking or texting, or everyone's got something going on.
Right.
And so that sense of community is really lacking.
Right.
And I hear it over and over and over again. So I think this fact that you were spurred to write a book addressing it shows that it's a real thing. It's an issue. And so how did you pour into this then? What were you able to draw from, and what conclusions were you able to share?
Yeah. Well, a lifetime of experience. Like I just feel that this has been like when my very first literary agent found me in 2013, she wanted me to write a book on friendship, and I'm just now doing it.
Wow.
But anyway, so it's just been a theme that God has put in my life, I think. But also, yeah, like, and what I'm seeing is exactly what you're describing. The research backs that up. I did a lot of research for this book as well. Generations today are spending twice as much time with their children as generations past. And we're starting all those activities earlier and all those things, which, in and of itself is not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's taken away from any kind of spare time, if our time is a pie, we have much less of it today to spend on friendship because we're pouring into these other things. And, I just encourage moms, especially young moms, you need to take care of you too. It's not, you're serving your kids well when you are coming to them as a most healthy parent. And part of that goes into that health is community, is talking with friends, is hanging out with them in the cracks of life. And I know that can feel overwhelming. It can feel like, oh, this is just one more thing I got to schedule into my already busy life. But I think if you take the time to do it, just in the crack, like I used to do it, meeting a mom at Barnes and Noble story time or the library story time, or after the kids were in bed, if my husband was home, we'd walk the Target, aisles together for 30 minutes. Finding those cracks of time to just get together, you will feel so much better. Like, I mean, I would just leave those meetings feeling like my pants fit better, like it just, and of course, then you got to have good friends who are that way. If your friends are such where you feel worse about yourself when you leave than when you got there, then, it might be time to look elsewhere. But like friendship has been really backburnered in our society, and it really just should not. We are suffering because of it.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good word. I want to paint a picture for you and tell me how you would come along someone in this situation.
Sure.
In the desire to make friends and be involved and connected with them, they say yes to everything. So yes, they will come, they will accept this invitation, they will go to this gathering, they will do all of these things. And after a certain amount of time has passed, absolute burnout and overwhelm. Because in an effort to make friendships and feel connected, they have actually just spent themselves entirely.
Right.
And so then there's a tendency to withdraw
Right.
and close doors.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
how would you come alongside her and encourage her in what to do to reset and really temper herself
Right.
in an entrance in relationships?
Right. Well, I would say I've been that girl before. And, for whatever reason, we here in the West, we're real pendulum swingy. We go from one extreme to the other. and,
True.
and I'm speaking to myself too. So I'm not, throwing stones. I'm talking to myself as well.
Yeah.
But like that, and that can happen. We're like, okay, we're going to, sprint our way to a friendship. And then we get tired and we're like, I need to lay in bed for the next 2 months. I would say find the middle.
Yeah.
Find the middle. And for what to look at to spend your energies on, I like to think about what is something you enjoy and then do that on repeat. So what I
Mm.
mean by that is, like, I have a friend, my friend Rebecca, who was one of those early moms way back when. We both have circled into Colorado Springs and live here now. She and I take an exercise class together twice a week, and so we can talk before class. We'll talk after class. Sometimes we'll grab a smoothie. Sometimes we're just in the parking lot, for 10 to 15 minutes talking after class. But we do that. And so it's something we enjoy, and then we do it together and on repeat. It's because those classes are scheduled. So that's the gift, I think, of a ritual of doing, even if you're like, listen, can we get together for coffee for 30 minutes, the third Thursday of every month, or, however, the third Saturday of every month, whatever it looks like. When you kind of just sort of put that date on the calendar, it's just done, and if you go and are enjoying it, then you want to keep going because you're getting life from it. You're getting benefit from it. So I would say start with something kind of like that. Maybe don't throw yourself into everything just because it exists, think it's something you enjoy and do it on repeat. Now, having said that, I made a couple of good friends, and for a season. We don't really chit chat now. We're friends on Facebook, but for a season we were great friends because I kept showing up. I don't love a PTA meeting, but my kids were in traditional school at this point, but I like to volunteer in my kids' classrooms, help the teachers out.
Yeah.
So, but like, I do like to do that, but do I love it? Did I wake up every day going, yay, I get to go, like, grade papers for 2 hours or 3 hours? No, but I did it because I wanted to be a help. That was the bigger gain there. And I wanted just, to kind of see the class in action and all of that. But another mom was doing it as well. And we just became really good friends and kind of took that friendship out of the classroom and would do things here and there outside of the classroom. So, there's opportunities within your schedule already. I think if you just show up consistently, you never know, invite somebody to do it with you, or maybe you meet somebody like I did in the classroom, you get that need met without having to, turn yourself into a circus act.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You touched on something that I would love to hear your take on, and that is friends for a season. This is just me personally. I can't speak on behalf of anyone else. But at one point in my life earlier on, I took everything so personally. And so if a season came to an end, I felt like it was my fault or my failure, or obviously something was wrong with me. But now I'm just like, girl, a season could be a day. All right. And it could change tomorrow. Like I'm in a different place today.
Right.
Than I was 20 years ago. But how would you address that these seasonal relationships are critical, they're necessary, but also, yeah, they can be temporary?
100%. And really, that was me in my 20s. I would just get so upset. Like, if I made a good friend, first of all, I wasn't good at, I'm a believer in you don't need 100 friends, but I do believe you need more than one. I need, you need a couple, 2, 3 anyway, just because if you're at all like me, you can kind of overwhelm one friend.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was me in my early 20s. I felt like I would put so much attention into a friend and not only kind of overwhelm them with expectations, but also be frustrated when they didn't give me as much as I thought I would. If they made plans with another friend, I could get kind of jealous,
Yeah.
and just feel so crushed. Like, why don't they want to spend more time with me? Yeah. And turning inward. And I think that's what loneliness can do. It tries to just turn us inward and focus on ourselves and all we're not getting. And I'm not saying that's not appropriate for a little bit of time to say, I am so sad because I'm lonely. This really stinks. I hate it and I'm tired of it. There
Yeah.
is nothing wrong. God welcomes our honesty on that, but we just don't want to stay stuck there. And I think having that mind shift, that if the expression goes, and I can't remember who said it originally, you're friends for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Not all friendships are forever. I mean, otherwise, author Drew Hunter, he wrote a great book called Made for Friendship, but he says, if our friendships never changed, we'd all be friends with and only with those we made in preschool or kindergarten.
Yeah.
So, and I think we'd be sad if that was like to miss out on some of the friendships that we've made afterwards. So,
Yeah.
because that probably doesn't describe the vast majority of us. And so realizing that, listen, if the creator of the world is also the creator of, if he cares about the number of hairs on your head and all of that, he cares about what friends are in your life. And if a friend is only there, I love what you say, a season can be a day, it can be a month, it can be oh, I love your boots, in the parking lot.
Yeah.
So that's that, having that kind of a loose, relaxed camaraderie idea about it all. The funny thing is the more you have that attitude, the more attractive you look as a friend. And I think the more you can draw others, more others are drawn towards you for that. And I think also, though, that comes from, and I'm guessing with you, Val, a real peace in friendship with the Lord. Like, I'm guessing you go to him first, like he is your friend that never fails you. And when you're filled up with him, then you aren't looking for other friends to fill you up as your little friend saviors like
Oh
I
no.
used to do. And so keeping that in mind, I think really helps you be able to just be able to be at peace when a friendship changes, even if you didn't really want it to change the way it is. But I get it's hard. My friend Selena says that sometimes rejection is God's protection, against what's not in our best interest. And, at the end of the day, that friendship may have long term just not been in our best interest. So it was there and then it was gone. But all the sympathy in the world for those that, are losing one that was a real treasured one, that can be a whole thing in and of itself. But just those, friendships that we had that maybe for, a little while that we just thought was going to keep going, that can be hard too. But we have to trust God's, got the big picture in mind in it. And he is ever for us through it.
So, Kristen, if moms, especially women, want to learn more about you personally, your book, Desperate Woman Seeks Friends, how can they find you? How can they connect with you?
Oh, you bet. So you can find me you can find the book wherever you like to buy books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Bookshop, Christian Book, wherever. But you can find it also on my website, KristenStrong.com, and that's KRISTEN strong.com. There's a books tab. You can find, all my books there. And and I'm on Instagram too at Kristen Strong.
Wonderful. And also, what would you say, just real quick, to encourage moms who are seeking for friendships or seeking to go deeper in their friendships?
You bet. Yeah, I would just say, my heart is with you. I have been there. The title of this book is a whole story I tell in the book about being desperate to find friends. And I felt like I couldn't pay anybody to be my friend, at least not in person, and so I just want you to just not give up. I understand, trying and wanting to give up because you're like, I've been there, done that. This all sounds great, but it doesn't work for me. Well, if Jesus walked this earth with friends, which he most certainly did, and, he was a perfect human, then it is a great idea for us. We need to do the same. And it's God's will for us to do the same. And anytime, we are praying and asking for something in Jesus' name, according to God's will, the word says we have it. So friends are yours to have. The friends you want and need are absolutely within your reach. It just often takes so much longer than we want it to. So I just encourage that girl. I see you, and please do not give up, because we need you and we need your friendship in this world.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Motherhood Experience podcast. To join our exclusive TME community, head over to themotherhoodexperience.com/learn more. Be sure to follow the Motherhood Experience on Facebook or Instagram, and please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment below, and we'll catch you next time.